They taught you that knowledge is power. But what if certain truths were deliberately locked away because accessing them unprepared could unravel your entire sense of self? What if ancient secrecy was actually a form of psychological protection? There's a belief most people hold without questioning it, that esoteric knowledge was hidden by power-hungry elites to maintain control over the ignorant masses. It's a convenient narrative. Simple, clean, good versus evil. But it collapses the moment you look deeper at how mystery schools actually function. Because the real reason for gradual revelation wasn't control. It was survival, psychological survival of the student. Walk into any authentic tradition of hidden knowledge, from Eleusinian mysteries to Tibetan Buddhism, from Hermetic orders to Sufi circles, and you find the same pattern. Information rationing, not arbitrary gatekeeping. Systematic preparation. Each level of teaching required demonstrated mastery of the previous one, not intellectual mastery. Embodied integration. You didn't move forward because you memorized concepts. You moved forward because you proved those concepts had fundamentally altered how you perceive, think, and act. Here's what almost nobody talks about. This wasn't hazing. This was damage control, because certain insights about consciousness, reality, power structures, and human nature are inherently destabilizing. They don't add to what you know. They demolish what you believed. And if your psyche isn't fortified enough to withstand that demolition, you don't emerge enlightened. You emerge shattered. Traditions knew this. They'd watched it happen repeatedly. Consider the architecture of initiation itself. Physical ordeals, symbolic deaths, isolation chambers, sensory deprivation, confrontation with terror. These weren't theatrical performances. They were stress tests, pushing the initiate to breaking points under controlled conditions to see if their mind could bend without snapping. Only those who passed were deemed capable of carrying heavier truths. Not because they were special, because they were resilient enough not to self-destruct. Now observe the modern landscape. Every occult text ever written is available instantly. Techniques for altering consciousness, methods for influencing perception, frameworks for understanding symbolic control, all accessible without filters, without guidance, without any assessment of readiness. We call this progress. We call this democratization of knowledge. But what if we're actually running a mass psychological experiment with no safety protocols? And here's the uncomfortable question nobody wants to ask. If those ancient barriers existed to protect both the knowledge and the person seeking it, what happens when we remove every single barrier simultaneously? Are we liberating consciousness or manufacturing fragmentation on an unprecedented scale? If this perspective shifts something in you, subscribe to keep following this investigation. Why? Knowing something and understanding it are completely different states. You've experienced this. You read something profound, something that resonates deeply. You feel the impact. You agree completely. You might even take notes. Then a week passes and absolutely nothing in your behavior has changed. That's not a personal failing. That's the fundamental difference between information and transformation. One lives in your head. The other rewires your entire operating system. Ancient practitioners understood this distinction with brutal clarity. That's why they built elaborate systems around single insights. You didn't just hear about the concept of ego death. You enacted it through fasting that weakened your physical certainties, through meditation that dissolved your mental boundaries, through ritual that encoded the teaching into muscle memory, emotional patterns, unconscious reflexes. The teaching didn't stay abstract. It became cellular. But there's something stranger happening beneath that surface. These traditions transmitted knowledge almost exclusively through direct relationship, master to student, in physical presence, not through texts, not through recorded teachings, through living transmission, because they recognize something modern education completely ignores. Certain states of consciousness can only be accessed in the presence of someone already inhabiting that state. It's contagious. But only at close range, only with trust, only with surrender. Think about what that means. The initiate wasn't receiving information downloads. They were entering altered states where their psychological defenses naturally lowered. where their belief systems temporarily loosened, where they became genuinely open to reconstruction. And only in those vulnerable moments was the knowledge introduced. Because introducing it earlier would trigger immediate rejection. The unprepared mind treats transformative truth like a virus. It attacks it, distorts it, neutralizes it. Now witness the modern paradox. You can watch videos about consciousness expansion while scrolling through social media. You can read about sacred mysteries while eating lunch. You can study techniques for psychological transformation in states of complete distraction. You're consuming insights that required years of preparation while giving them minutes of fragmented attention, then wondering why nothing sticks, why nothing changes. And here's what cuts deeper. Maybe the problem isn't lack of access. Maybe it's oversaturation without context, without commitment, without the friction that forces integration. Ancient schools understood that certain knowledge requires sacrifice, not literal sacrifice, psychological sacrifice, willingness to abandon comfortable illusions, courage to let false identities die, and that process hurts. Which is exactly why support structures existed. Community, guidance, gradual progression with witnesses. Drop a comment if this is landing. Comments push this content further than anything else. How symbolic language operates below your conscious awareness. You see them everywhere and never question why. Specific geometric shapes, particular animals, recurring numbers. They appear in corporate logos, currency design, architectural layouts, entertainment. When someone points out the pattern, you think coincidence, or you think conspiracy theory. But there's a third option that's far more unsettling. These symbols aren't random, and they aren't necessarily conspiratorial. They're functional. They communicate directly with parts of your mind that your rational awareness can't access or control. Initiates in mystery traditions didn't study symbols as historical curiosities. They learned them as operational technology. Each symbol contained multiple frequencies. The exoteric layer that anyone could see. The esoteric layer revealed only after years of study. And the operative layer accessed by almost no one, where the symbol stops being representation and becomes activation. This deepest layer was dangerous. Because operative symbols don't just point to power, they trigger power. Here's how it works. Show someone a national flag and watch their physiology change. Heart rate, breathing, emotional state. That's conditioned symbolic response at the most basic level. Now amplify that. Imagine a symbol so densely loaded with meaning, repeated so consistently in specific contexts, that merely perceiving it shifts your neurochemistry, your emotional baseline, your interpretation of everything around you in that moment. This isn't theoretical. This is how advertising functions, how political messaging functions, how cultural conditioning functions. But here's the detail that changes everything. In mystery schools, you didn't just consume symbols. You created them. You drew them, carved them, meditated on them until they stopped being external objects and became internal structures. Until you could see them with eyes closed. Until they appeared unbidden in dreams. Until they functioned as permanent gateways to specific states of awareness. That's applied magic. Not supernatural, neurological, but no less potent. And this is where it gets genuinely uncomfortable. This knowledge never disappeared. It evolved. Corporations employ it. Governments employ it. Media conglomerates employ it. They understand that repeated symbols become perceived truth. They understand that visual narratives shape behavior beneath conscious detection. They understand that controlling a culture's dominant symbols means controlling the culture itself. And they do this openly. But because most people were never initiated into symbolic literacy, the pattern remains invisible. If this content is adding value, hit the like button. It helps this channel reach others who need to see this. The actual cost of receiving truth before you're ready to carry it. Ancient traditions grasped something most modern seekers refuse to accept. Real knowledge doesn't add to who you are. It destroys who you were. Not metaphorically, literally. Every certainty you held, every belief you relied on, every identity you constructed, all of it disintegrates. And if you haven't developed the internal architecture to rebuild something authentic in its place, you don't evolve. You fragment. That's why initiation was never just about gaining knowledge. It was about developing the capacity to lose everything and remain whole. Hermetic texts speak of the second death, not physical death, psychological dissolution. The moment when ego structures collapse, protective illusions fall away, and you perceive reality without filters. And that moment is genuinely terrifying, because everything that gave your life meaning vanishes. Your goals seem hollow, your relationships seem like performances, your achievements seem irrelevant, you're suspended in pure void. And if you weren't prepared to navigate that void, you might never emerge. You can get trapped in nihilism, despair, permanent fragmentation. But here's the paradox. That collapse isn't optional. It's necessary, because only after false structures fall can you build something true. Only after illusions die can you see clearly. Only after ego loses dominance can you access deeper layers of consciousness. So initiation didn't prevent the death. It orchestrated it. In controlled conditions, with guides present, with community ready, with integration tools prepared. Now contrast that with modern access. You can watch videos about ego dissolution while commuting. You can read about mystical death while waiting in line. You can consume insights that took generations to understand in 15-minute segments. And nobody warns you, nobody prepares you, nobody catches you when you inevitably collapse. You're alone, with information too powerful, with structure too weak, and the result is a silent epidemic of spiritual fragmentation. You see it everywhere. People accumulating esoteric knowledge without genuine transformation, collecting techniques without commitment, consuming mystery without reverence, then wondering why they feel increasing emptiness, confusion, disconnection. Because knowledge without preparation doesn't heal. It exposes wounds you didn't know existed. And if you don't know how to treat exposed wounds, they become infected. And here's what almost nobody will say out loud. Maybe some people shouldn't have access to certain knowledge. Not because they're inferior, because they're not ready. The same way you don't give a scalpel to a child. Not out of cruelty, out of protection. Knowledge about consciousness manipulation, perception control, identity dissolution is a psychological scalpel, and without training, you will cut yourself. When seeing too clearly becomes its own form of isolation. Have you ever felt like you know things you wish you didn't? Like you see patterns you'd prefer to ignore? Like you recognize manipulation, control, false narratives everywhere, and that awareness separates you from everyone around you? That's not paranoia. That's the natural consequence of knowledge without community. Ancient traditions never allowed this. If you were initiated, you belonged. You had others seeing what you saw, speaking the same symbolic language, carrying the same weight together. Solitude was never part of the design. But when you access hidden knowledge alone, especially now, you enter progressive isolation. Because the more you perceive, the less you can relate to those who don't. Ordinary conversations feel superficial. Common concerns seem trivial. You try sharing insights and encounter blank stares. So you stop trying, and you withdraw, not from superiority, from exhaustion. Exhaustion of carrying perception that nobody validates, nobody understands, nobody wants to hear. And what's genuinely disturbing is this: that isolation isn't accidental, it's structural. When you step outside the dominant narrative, you automatically step outside the tribe. And human beings weren't designed to exist outside the tribe. Your biology, your psychology, your entire social architecture evolved for connection. So when knowledge separates you from connection, it stops being liberation. It becomes prison, a prison of solitary lucidity. Ancient initiations solved this by creating new tribe, community of the initiated, people who underwent the same death, saw the same shadows, carry the same secrets. That created bonds deeper than blood. Family, because it was family of consciousness. Family chosen through shared transformation. So you were never alone, never carried weight alone, never doubted alone. Today, you can have infinite access to occult knowledge and zero access to authentic community. You can learn witchcraft, ceremonial magic, practical occultism, psychological manipulation, all alone in a dark room. Then wake up every day carrying weight nobody around you can perceive. feeling loneliness that has no name, because you were initiated by an algorithm, not by a master, not by a living tradition, by an automated system that doesn't care if you survive what you learn. If this video opens something important, subscribe to this channel, turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next, and comment below which part hit you hardest. Because maybe the new model of initiation is this: digital community of people navigating the same perceptions, carrying the same weights, recognizing the same patterns. It's not ideal, but maybe it's what's possible.